Here's what I want you to think about. The last time someone told you about their money choices and your brain immediately screamed, "That's a terrible idea." Maybe it was a friend who decided to rent forever in Singapore, or a cousin who spent their bonus on a 3-week Europe trip instead of topping up their CPF. Your reaction was instant, right? They're making a huge mistake. They're going to regret this. But what if I told you that snap judgment says more about your own blind spots than it does about their financial future? Let's talk about something psychologists call dead end bias. It's this fascinating mental trap where we automatically assume that anyone who strays from traditional financial advice is doomed to fail. And trust me, this bias is everywhere in Singapore and Malaysia. It shapes how we judge others, how we judge ourselves, and most importantly, it stops us from learning approaches that might actually work better for our own lives. So what exactly is dead end bias? Simply put, it's when you see someone breaking conventional money rules and your brain immediately writes them off as heading toward financial disaster. The formula is dead simple. Traditional path equals success, non-traditional path equals dead end. No nuance, no context, just instant judgment. In our part of the world, you see this play out constantly. A 28-year-old Singaporean who hasn't applied for a BTO flat yet, obviously wasting money on rent. Someone who withdrew their EPF early in Malaysia, financial suicide, no question. A couple who spent 8,000 ringgit on a Japan holiday while still living with their parents, irresponsible and immature, case closed. But here's the thing. When we make these judgments, we're assuming we know the entire story, the inevitable outcome, and all the variables involved. And usually, we know precisely none of these things. So why do we do this? Why are we so quick to judge financial choices that break traditional rules? Well, there are actually 3 powerful psychological forces at work here. First, we absolutely crave predictable narratives. The traditional financial story is one we've all heard a million times. Save 20% of your income, buy property by 30, build a 6-month emergency fund, max out your CPF contributions, retire at 65. It's a neat story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Our brains love this because it's comfortable and familiar. When someone deviates from this script, it creates cognitive discomforts. Our brain doesn't have a ready-made template for someone who spends 50,000 ringgit on travel before getting married, or a successful professional who chooses to rent indefinitely. Without that familiar narrative, our brain does what brains do. It fills in the blanks with negative assumptions. Second, there's this reverse survivorship bias happening. We've all heard the cautionary tales. The colleague who over-leveraged on property and went bankrupt during the financial crisis. The uncle who gambled away his retirement savings. These stories stick in our minds because they confirm what we already believe about what happens when you break the rules. But what about the quiet successes? The unconventional approaches that work out perfectly fine? Those stories don't spread because they're less dramatic, and the people living them often keep quiet precisely because they know they'll face judgment. So we end up with this completely skewed perception of risk. Third, and this one's uncomfortable to admit, many of us have a personal investment in the traditional path. If you've screamed for years to afford that down payment, if you've stayed in a miserable job for stability, if you've delayed experiences to build your savings, seeing someone else take a different path can feel genuinely threatening. Because if the alternative path works out, it suggests that maybe, just maybe, all your sacrifices weren't strictly necessary. That's a painful possibility. So your brain protects you by dismissing the alternative as foolish or unsustainable. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Dead end bias wouldn't be a problem if traditional financial advice worked equally well for everyone, but it absolutely doesn't. Take the standard advice to prioritize home ownership. For a Singaporean who needs career mobility to maximize earning potential, renting whilst investing the difference in index funds might actually generate more wealth than being locked into a property. For someone whose industry is experiencing rapid change, flexibility might genuinely be worth more than equity. Or consider emergency fund dogma. Everyone needs 6 months of expenses saved, right? But what if you're a civil servant with incredible job security, comprehensive insurance, and family support? You might rationally choose to deploy that capital elsewhere. Meanwhile, a Malaysian freelancer with irregular income might need 12 months saved, not 6. The point isn't that traditional advice is wrong. It's that financial choices that break traditional rules aren't automatically wrong either. Context matters enormously. And this is what dead-end bias causes us to miss. We miss that different people have different risk profiles. Traditional advice assumes certain risks, like market volatility, whilst completely ignoring others, like opportunity costs or career immobility. Some people rationally prioritize different risks based on their actual circumstances. We also miss that people optimize for different goals. Standard financial wisdom optimizes for security and wealth accumulation. But some people optimize for maximum career growth, or meaningful experiences during their youth, or time with aging parents. These aren't financially ignorant choices, they're different choices with different priorities, and we definitely miss hidden advantages and safety nets. That person who appears reckless might have family wealth to fall back on, incredibly valuable skills that ensure employability, multiple income streams, or a partner with stable income. Judging without this context means missing the full picture. So how do we overcome dead-end bias? Start by questioning your immediate reaction. When you encounter financial choices that seem baffling, pause before judging. Ask yourself, what would need to be true for this to be a reasonable decision? This simple reframing opens up understanding rather than shutting it down. Learn to separate principles from prescriptions. The principle of living below your means is sound. The prescription to save exactly 20% of gross income is arbitrary. Principles are broadly applicable. Prescriptions depend heavily on individual contexts. Also, look for what's working, not just what's missing. Instead of fixating on what someone isn't doing, notice what they are achieving. Are they building valuable skills, creating meaningful experiences? These have financial value too, even if it's harder to measure on a spreadsheet. And apply this thinking to yourself. Dead-end bias doesn't just affect how you judge others. It affects how you judge your own unconventional choices. If you feel guilty for not following traditional advice, ask whether that guilt is warranted or whether you're actually making perfectly rational decisions for your unique situation. Look, not every unconventional financial choice is wise. Some people genuinely make poor decisions that lead to hardship. The point isn't to abandon judgment entirely or celebrate recklessness. It's to replace automatic dismissal with thoughtful analysis. The next time someone's financial choices seem completely baffling, consider that they might see possibilities, risks, and trade-offs that aren't immediately visible to you. They might be wrong, sure, but they also might be right in ways that don't fit the standard narrative. And that possibility is absolutely worth considering before writing them off as heading toward a dead end. If this video got you thinking differently about money decisions, head over to whywespend.com for more articles on the psychology behind how we spend, save, and think about money. And subscribe to this channel because we're exploring the messy reality of personal finance, not just the textbook version.